Very good. So we're doing the annex session, and since it's a small group, I thought we would keep it as much of a conversation as possible. So please feel free to jump in with, so it's not like one of these formal things where, okay, we'll talk for whatever 20 minutes and then open it up for questions. It's open from the beginning. So it doesn't have to be a question. If you have a comment about this whole idea of heritage food and all of that, feel free to jump in. But I thought I would just sort of kick it off by, well, first of all, welcoming Lily to Kolkata. And she has actually been doing this work around looking at heritage food. So I thought maybe first I'd just ask you, what the hell is heritage food? It just, everybody talks about heritage food, heritage this, heritage that now. It's become a cool buzzword, but when it comes to food, what is heritage food?
Good question, and you could use any number of terms, and actually maybe a question that we can all discuss, since again it's a small group and I value kind of interactivity in general, is whether heritage in India has any, is it a cool hip term? Are we hearing it? Is that the right term to describe what's going on with this Indian food kind of moment or movement or whatever it is? So here I would say like traditional food might be actually a better term, but I started using the phrase heritage food because I was working in the US South, and in the US South, it's heritage. Like, this is a heritage hog, right? Like, this is a heritage breed of pig, which then will give us heritage pork, or these are heritage beans. And heirloom is the other word that they would use, but it's really so much about heritage in an American context. And so then when I started to live in other places and work in other places and think about food in other places, and I also was like, okay, well maybe heritage can also travel, even if people aren't really using the word heritage. The idea is still, I think, salient about, there are rich food traditions that are either dead or endangered, and they need to be preserved or revitalized in some way through a kind of collective effort of chefs and cookbook authors and home cooks and Instagrammers and bloggers, and everybody needs to kind of like keep these stories and recipes alive. So that's what I'm looking at. So what is it? Yeah, it's the food that our grandmothers cooked, I guess, although it's always more complicated than that. It has to do also with biodiversity and types of grains, dals, vegetables, that may have been kind of bred out of the dominant marketplace.
But in that sense, see, when you were looking at heritage food in America, was the movement there because those heritage foods were being lost, and so it was about trying to reclaim them, give them prominence again, or was it like sort of a restaurant-driven buzzword movement?
Yeah, I mean, so the buzzword factor is huge, like in every context. And I think in an Indian context, too, these questions about, I'm writing right now about millet, very timely given year of millet. It's like very stressful. But it's like, how much of this is buzz and how much of this is real? Like, who benefits from this? Is it just like that I feel good about myself because I got a millet pasta for my toddlers and then I'm like a good mom and I can sleep at night? Or is this like actually changing agriculture to make it more sustainable, or to support farmers' livelihoods, or to protect cultural traditions that might be in danger in terms of like local indigenous knowledge about intercropping and what should grow when, who is this for is a very, very real question in the South and in India, I think both. But to answer your actual question, yes, restaurant driven, but also very much agricultural. So the biggest example, the clearest example, has anyone here, do you guys know about Carolina gold rice? So the biggest, you're like, why would I know about Carolina gold rice? Well, it's a rice culture, so I'm happy to share with you about another great rice culture, which is the rice culture of the US Carolinas. The coastal south of the United States is a great kind of failed rice culture, and a lot of the heritage rice varieties were lost. And so a group of scientists and academics, mostly this one guy, David Shields, actually went and did like genetic research in these old grain storehouses and in these seed-saving libraries that were in university settings or in the government, and they cloned the rice so that it was a viable paddy, and then now they have this Carolina Gold rice, and if you go to like a hipster restaurant in Charleston, you can pay, you know, whatever, like $25 to have this like super tasty, super nice heritage rice, which was bred, you know, like cloned from a like archival seed. So it's both. Like on the one hand, it's all totally fake, and I think my job is like to describe that, and also things are really coming back that really were gone, you know, and I think that's exciting.
I mean, the millets reminded me, I was just reading a newspaper clipping yesterday. It was one of these sort of political gossip columns from Delhi, and this person said apparently a lot of these ministers are already fed up with the year of the millet, because in all official functions now they have to keep serving millet this and millet that, and they're like, can we have some flour stuff as well, or atta, which goes to your point, you know, there is the good intention, and then there is, you know, how are you doing it? Is the way you're doing it organic? Or are you just sort of shoving millet down people's throats?
Yeah, and my understanding about a lot of this is that it is extremely top-down, you know, and so that's also something as a professor and as someone like with whatever platform that I have, I feel very uncomfortable being like, yes, we should all, you know, eat millets. Like, I'm not a farmer, you know, this isn't my background, so then, you know, who am I to like make any kind of a programmatic statement like, yes, you know, millet 2023, because I think we see with a lot of these like so-called superfoods in other developing nations, like the quinoa story in Peru, where, you know, a staple grain was like became an international superfood and then became no longer really a viable crop for people who traditionally ate it to even have as a staple grain anymore. So I wonder, you know, could that happen? I don't know.
How many people here have eaten millets? Like, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, how many people here eat millet on a weekly basis, I would say?
Before
yeah.
this whole year of millet? Right. Right.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, so I'm in Pune. Like, so when I'm not when I'm not here in the town hall under these magnificent chandeliers, I'm in Pune, and so in that cultural context, it's also very different because millet is pretty standard. And especially in the kind of like very specific cultural context in which I just moved, but until I just moved, I was in the kind of family joint house of like very Puneri, middle class Brahmin people, and so that's like the context that I inherited, and in that neighborhood, everyone is eating millet like at either once a day or every second day. And so it's super funny to me that now it's like, okay, I can go to, you know, Kalagota Cafe in Fort area and spend like a ton of money on like a vegan, gluten-free, ragi chocolate pudding. And I'm like, oh, that's the same thing that I make in my house. Basically, it's nachni sadhva, except like nobody gives a shit about nachni sadhva. Sorry, I had to swear, I apologize. Like nobody cares about nachni sadhva. It's like not cool at all. So it's interesting to approach this from a context where these traditions haven't died. And I guess that's also like just to zoom out about my book project, like buy my book that doesn't exist yet. That's why I think this Indian case study is really important to compare these global north countries with, because I think that in India, these traditions aren't dead. Like you don't have to go to a lab and clone a grain, you know? Like the biodiversity is still kind of hanging on. The traditions and the cultural knowledge are still hanging on. And so that's also why I feel it's very urgent to kind of celebrate and amplify.
So what do you find in terms of the way it's progressing in India? Is it different from what you've seen in whether in the Nordic cuisine or in American South?
I think it's kind of the same, and that's what spooks me a bit, is that it's like people in urban centers are kind of going back to things that there's no continuous knowledge for the people who are eating it. Does that make sense? So like Thomas Zacharias, formerly of the Bombay Canteen, now of the Locavore, who's a figure that I'm thinking alongside and writing about, had this program called Know Your Daisy Vegetable. And I was so kind of flabbergasted. Like, do people not know how to cook like fresh tordal, or they don't know about tonli? Like, these are, sorry, I don't know what tonli is.
What is, I don't know, what is
Tonli, tindora.
Tindora.
Is that right?
Tindora.
Okay, anyway, sorry. People don't, I'm like, don't they know these are really basic, at least in Maharashtra, these are like household vegetables? But then when I was talking, the answer is no, a lot of people like are not cooking the range of vegetables that they used to. So I think I see a stratification happening between people for whom the traditions really have been lost, and they really are then going back to consume this gentrified version of rural food traditions. And at the same time, but unconnected to that, are people who are eating, the nachni satva or the ragi muda, or, they're consuming millets or a wider range of vegetables in a traditional way. So I see those two things they don't talk to each other, and I guess that's frustrating for me.
So then do you think this whole conversation of heritage food can happen without this elephant of gentrification in the room?
I mean, I hope it can't. I don't know. I'm trying to be the elephant, I guess. You know what I mean? I'm like, hey, everybody, we should talk about class. We should talk about, like who benefits. We should talk about agriculture. We should be thinking about food systems and not just food choices. Like, in a way, I hope that this conversation can't be had without that elephant, because, like, that elephant is hopefully my research.
Right.
I don't know.
But I'm curious, like,
Yeah, what do you
I
all
want to ask any of you, like, if somebody tells you about, someone wants to talk to you about heritage food, for you, like, just off the top of your head, what would be a heritage food for you?
Yeah, it's thank you. This would be so helpful if you would respond.
Anyone?
We really have to identify something as a heritage food in India particularly, because if you look at the Indian culinary history, pretty much everything has evolved in a way, everything becomes heritage. Even your very basic mache roll, if I look at it, it's a heritage food. Every household has a different mache roll recipe. So that meaning every household has its own heritage food. So I think the term heritage food itself, particularly in age-old countries like India, is a very diverse topic of discussion, and I think that really needs to be boiled down into a situation where we actually decide what to be discussed as a heritage food and what not.
So that leads to a question. I mean, should we be deciding? I mean, in that case, when you're in a situation, we were talking about this, when you're in a situation where every household has a different mache jhol recipe, then maybe you shouldn't have a committee that sits and says, this recipe, with this masala is the heritage.
Just to add to it, recently we had Saraswati Puja, right?
Right.
Then over there, that's also over there we have a heritage food, which is Kota Shettu. And in that, actually what I feel is heritage is not what we are cooking. Heritage is the flavor that you have. Right? My grandmother used to do cooking in the way, and she shared her secrets with my mother. Though this year also my mother did the Kota Shettu, but it was not of the same flavor. They differ. That's the heritage where it is like.
Are you saying your grandmother left out something from this?
No, actually it's not like that. No, it's a hape jal.
Jal.
That's right.
Despite of the fact that I can cook, she can also cook.
But the hand
But
is.
there is something, that X factor, that is creating a heritage in Indian food. Absolutely. Biryani, if you're talking about this particular biryani, this Mughal dish, there is lavish
Yeah.
number of dishes we can have. There are numbers, but the heritage is lying in the system where it gives us the story with the biryani. Like when we go for biryani, okay, we can go faster, we can go for Rahman, but ask a biryani lover, they will never go for anything else than Roya. That is heritage.
So there is a memory with heritage that comes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is a specific thing, that X factor that will create a heritage, and a specific happy smiling memory with the food.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think so just to be very like specific about my arguments, one of the things I'm trying to say is it's not just that any individual flavor is at risk of being lost, but that hand touch in general is being lost. So something that I'm also writing about in this book is like the dosa printer. Maybe you heard about this like new dosa printer, the Rotimatic, or, I actually love the book, The Masala Lab, and I use it to cook. But I think this idea that we need like more science, we need more technology, Indian food should be modern, and then it will have a future, I find that very dangerous, because to me, the heritage is the work of the hand, and it's like, if we can imagine, it gives me goosebumps to think about, like so many women, generations and generations and generations and generations and generations and generations of women cooking these foods by hand, and like the knowledge that all of those hands had. To me, that is like the most incredible heritage, and that is what's being lost. So not even one way to cook biryani or one secret ingredient or one tip and trick, but like the entire field of tips and tricks, I think, is what's endangered. So I end the book with this very like impassioned, plea for like handmade food by women, because it's like.
But that leads to the question, how do you preserve heritage like that? When you look at a building like this, so this may be falling apart at some point, somebody comes in and they says, we will restore it, we'll get the right architects who know how to do the lime wash or whatever, and so then we can say, this heritage has been preserved, and we are having our event here. But in this case, when you're talking about something which is it's not just about the recipe, not just about the ingredients, but it is about the stories and the hatir jadoo.
Yeah.
How do you preserve such heritage?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a couple answers, which are like family cookbooks, a restaurant which has been in business for hundreds of years, they have found a way, right? So to become a cultural institution like Royal Biryani or any of these kind of heritage restaurants. But it's tricky, and I'm very excited for tomorrow's GI panel, because I think the effort of the GI tag is some attempt, right, to say like, okay, this is important and this needs to be preserved, and so we're going to create like a government institution around this. So globally, like in my research, the answer to that question is that you create a legal framework around it, and you say, okay, this Parmesan cheese is really special, it tastes amazing, we don't want it to lose to craft cheese, and so we're going to set up a consortium of cheesemakers, and they're going to be protected by law, and UNESCO is going to protect them, and all of these like legal bodies, international legal bodies, are going to protect the culinary heritage, and anybody who says, this is Parmesan cheese, but it's not part of the consortium and it doesn't pass all the tests, then they are fined and they have to stop producing. So like, that's been traditionally the answer, is this kind of legal framework of like, protected origin cheese, protected origin wine, protected origin mishti. That's been the answer. But in India, I don't think there's very few foods which have this tag, and even fewer agricultural products that have the GI tag, and it's not such a robust kind of phenomenon, I think. So it becomes much more difficult, I think, when you lack those like legal frameworks or diplomatic frameworks around protecting culinary heritage.
For example, I don't think Bandel cheese has a tag, does it? As far as I know, it doesn't.
I think it does.
It does have a tag?
Yeah.
Think? It does.
But I don't know if that does anything for it.
Most of it is not produced in Bandel anymore. I don't think anything's produced in Bandel anymore. I might be wrong, but I think it's actually being made in Kolkata now.
And I think so, like in a European context, there's a huge value addition. So there's like a lot of economists, right, who have pretty much proven that if you have, Taleggio cheese and it has the label that says this is made in the Valley Taleggio.
It's not.
It's not. Okay, not. Good. Sorry, then I don't know. Good. But in a European context, you get a lot of money, right? Like it's very advantageous financially for the success of your operation to have one of these tags. In an Indian context, I don't think it is. Like, I don't think Bandel cheese is going to like, is it a value addition in a simple economic sense for Bandel cheese to have a GI tag? I don't think so. My sense is no.
Here, to me, it feels like, and I'm ready to be corrected, it feels like the GI tag becomes an end in itself. Like you go and you say like, oh, whatever it is, the Rasgulla, the tea or something, we're going to get the GI tag, and once it gets the GI tag, everyone says, wow, look, we got the GI tag, and then everybody goes home. Then it's like, what does the tag achieve to move to help preserve this, or, you know, are there other things being done? Yeah.
Everybody sitting in this room will have a different favorite, because somebody will like Aslan, she likes royal, I like royal. So everybody will have a different favorite altogether. So I think this whole GI tag or the flavor, I think food is more about memories, rather than necessity. And Indian context, it's all about memories.
Yeah, and they're complex dishes also. I mean, I think this is something that I've also noticed in the kind of Indian food movement versus other, you know, Southern food, and that, like, the dishes are more like, they're just more complex, you know. There's a wider range of ingredients. The techniques used to prepare these dishes, Mita is a great example. Like, it's not so easy that anybody can just take it and elevate it and change it and put their own little chefy spin on it, because it's not like so easy to make a good biryani, or it's not so easy to make, you know, sandesh or any of these dishes.
And have you found in the movement here, in the whatever Indian food movement, if you would want to call it that, like in terms of claiming heritage, has the result of it also percolated back down to the people who originally, have they benefited from this?
No, I don't know. I think that's kind of, like, I want India to be my, like, hopeful, like, maybe it will be different kind of example compared to the Nordic countries and compared to the United States. But I'm also, like I say, I see the same kinds of things happening in India, that it's restaurant driven, that it's kind of celebrity chef driven, that there's not a lot of conversation about home cooking, not a lot of conversation about, you know, nostalgia, personal nostalgia, like those things that I see missing in these developed countries. Then I also feel, oh my God, like in India, I see it kind of going along the same road. So I hope so. I mean, I think the Locavore is a great example of a cultural heritage or a culinary heritage kind of focused platform that is genuinely trying to, like, boost sales, you know, like that's trying to, like, sell products that will hopefully impact livelihoods of those culinary producers. So that's good.
Right. They've started doing that. Outfits like Amar Khamar and all, they've been doing I've been to a dinner there, which is very interesting.
Went back into the villages to try and get farmers to grow more heirloom rice, go back from these hybrid rice to going back to heirloom rice. So I think there is a movement happening.
Yeah. I hope so. I mean, I'm like, I think there is a movement too. That's the question, right? It's like, you know, what kind of a change is Amar Kamar creating, to take that example? You know, hopefully when you create an urban market for a wider variety of rices, that then those farmers actually increase the diversity of the crops that they grow. I mean, we hope.
We hope. I should keep a track of the
Yeah,
time.
we done?
I'm not actually sure what time. What time do we have?
Do you all have questions? I mean, like, if you're...
Someone
do you want to talk?
Chase us out, so that's fine. I assume, I don't know when the next panel is starting, but you know, we can just But I was just actually in Oaxaca, Mexico, in December, and there's like all this like these fancy restaurants serve you fire ants and crickets and stuff and thing. And I remember the guide, and it's a well-known chef from Mexico City who set up this lovely restaurant. And the guide, who was sort of a walking tour guide, he said, like, everybody says insects are the future of food, you know. But he said, but in our case, it's also our past. You know, this was our past. This is what we ate. And then now it's being rediscovered and made into the future. But that goes back to the question I was asking. How do you acknowledge the people for whom it was already the past, as opposed to just taking it from them and putting it on a restaurant menu? And they've been shamed into not eating that kind of food. And has the Indian food movement gone there at all?
Not too much. I mean, I know that there's this project called Forest Post, which is like kind of Adivasi communities, and so trying to like create urban markets for honey and other products that they're making, like a Shaktivari kind of a tea and stuff like that. But less so. But I agree. I think it's really important. It's something for me when I think about this new Nordic movement and the like kind of colossal, like stratospheric success of this Nordic food, and the way in which what they're doing is basically just rebranding indigenous food, like explicitly these are the same dishes that indigenous people are eating in those regions. That's to me where I feel this is so shameful. Like, how dare you charge 350 euros for someone to eat reindeer meat when in fact, you know, communities were shamed that they shouldn't be eating reindeer, that this was uncivilized, that they should become Christian, that they should go change their names, change their language, you know, and then it's like, what a slap in the face then that these culinary traditions are like sold back to people like me, you know. It's like, so it's something I'm thinking about in other places, and in India I don't know enough to really say, but I agree with you completely. I think there's something very important about like tribal knowledge, indigenous knowledge. There's also Sputnik Farms. Do you know Sputnik Farms outside Bangalore is this collective that's very interesting, and it's like all of these things they're cool, good organizations that are run by like educated urban people who like had a breakdown and left their IT job, you know, and were like, actually this sucks, let me go in the countryside and like start fresh. So I'm cynical, you can tell. But it's a great project because what they do is they work with local Adivasi communities on tubers, like different root vegetables, like arbi and, you know, like arbi adjacent things. Arbi in Hindi, is it arbi? Okay,
Arbi,
good.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know Marathi, like some things in Marathi are different, some are same. So like different types of these roots, which are still consumed and grown by Adivasi people, and trying to kind of make them popular. And so they have like a farm share that you can buy for people in Bangalore, where they not only sell the vegetables, but they teach you how to cook them and prepare them in different ways. Yeah, they still are. So then that's kind of good, you know, that's kind of interesting.
I think we should be good.
Like, should we wrap? What's up? Like, do you want to
wrap
talk?
it up. I don't know, what time is this supposed to? 5 o'clock, next session. Okay. Oh, well, it's just us now. So you can, so if you guys.
Yeah, I'm like, tell me about your story. What brings you to this topic? You know,
So I'm curious to hear what you guys think of this topic. I mean, like if you see a restaurant that says heritage food, is that a plus or does it bring up your suspicions?
I will agree on that. I think that is the thing. Like, I'm basically a history student. So history and food has always been one of my most favorite topics. So every time people talk about food, I prefer listening to them also. And these days, if you see, it's more about people talking about Instagrammable places.
Right, of course.
You know, so
More than the menu is the Instagram worthiness of the.
important thing that people talk about. So a lot of my friends and they keep tagging me. This is a place you should try. Like, I'm a person who prefers exploring food, not the place. So if I have to explore food, I can find it anywhere. It can be a street side villa. It can be somebody's home. It can be your kitchen. It can be my kitchen. It can be my
Right.
kitchen also. It can just be any food. So I really would have to pick the Instagrammable cafe or pub to legacy as such. Apart from the modern kitchens, we do not see the legacy being passed down. So you cannot just for any random heritage food and then start selling it. Like ma'am rightly said, this tribal food, we discuss it so much, and then people are selling it at 300 euros. The same cases in Calcutta also. We have places who are selling tribal cuisine. You have the tribal themed restaurants. But are we at all sure that it is a tribal cuisine or not?
Yes, tribal and seafood.
Yeah, I mean, like just because I put it in a bamboo and
Bamboo.
it doesn't become tribal. Come on. There are so many different traditions of cooking in India across different spaces. You really cannot say this is tribal, this is not. Because
Right.
Mashmata and Korangal food you have in even in our temple, you have the same thing in tribal regions also. The techniques, the spices are different. So you cannot really compare the taste. You cannot really say this is right, this is wrong. I think that is a very basic differentiation or the problematic situation we have in India in particular. Because the recipes are not written down. There is no specific recipe, so we don't know what to call it. So I think there is a I think in India we're also looking at, we are a huge country, so people from North India don't know South India. Exactly.
Correct.
That is this void of discovery about the Northeast, because the Northeast food traditions are very different from ours. I don't see garam masala. Absolutely.
No, and I was just in Arunachal, and before I went, like a good Google person, I looked up 10 foods to have, and then I realized Arunachal is so valley and tribe dependent that because I was in Tawang, all the things I'd researched, people, they had never even heard of it. All you could get in Tawang were momos and like Punjabi food, and momo thukpa was basically all you could get. And even there they said, like, yak you can't get because tourists don't like yak. So then therefore that was part of the heritage, but you have to go to someone's home to have something like that. Do we have to wrap? Okay, sure. I think we have been told to now wrap up actually.
Great.
So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And oh yeah, I'm Lily Kelting, and if you want to continue to talk, I'm so happy to, because again, this is like the book that I'm actively editing, so all feedback and thoughts like really help. And my email is lily.kelting@gmail.com if you don't have time today. So that's it. Yeah, I have another session. I think maybe even very soon. Okay. All right.